they don't create real opportunities for their people, and then they wonder why good people leave. Well, we look at everybody's pay once a year, and we budgeted 3.5%. If you're really outstanding, Rents, you could get 5, and if you're really mediocre, you could get 2.5. No, that's not going to do it for good people.
Hey everyone, it's time for Design Development, your hub to learn direct from top professionals in real estate design, development, and construction. I'm your host, Renz Hayes, founding partner at H&O, lifelong learner, obsessed with high-powered organizations and the leaders that guide them. If this is your first time on the show, thank you so much for tuning in, and if you're a returning guest, can't thank you enough. Let's get to the show. As I was preparing for this episode, like you think through all this stuff that you've done over a wonderful career, and it's like, where the hell do we start? And I thought a cool way is like, how did someone like me and you get in contact? Like, where did we build this relationship? And it really stems from LinkedIn.
That's it.
And you're an avid contributor. So tell me, like, why are you on LinkedIn? How did you end up there? Like, what do you see on the platform?
You're an avid contributor yourself. I mean, you put out a tremendous amount of great content, and so that's how I think we got acquainted. Sure. I mean, I used to be on Facebook and Instagram, and those things were effective, by the way, for promoting our construction and development business. But they're filled with so much trash that about 4 or 5 years ago, I just got completely out of it. The only thing I use Facebook for these days is to buy and sell stuff. I mean, Facebook ads are amazing.
It's like the new Craigslist, right?
It is. It's like you throw anything on there at all and it sells. I mean, it's just crazy. The other day I had a leftover, 2.6 right-hand pre-hung 6-panel door, and I just put it on there, and about 2 hours later, it's gone. I mean, anyway,
someone just shows up and grabs it.
And so that sort of made me gravitate to LinkedIn, which by and large still sticks with business related topics. And so that's why I'm there.
Agree. I do see some frustration in the LinkedIn world. Like, they've changed their algorithm and stuff, but it's largely become an unbelievable business to business platform over the last 5 years, for sure. It's kind of grown from an online resume to really a place where we can all interact at a professional level. Like you said, you and I, we still haven't met in person, but we built a pretty good relationship, and it all started with interacting on LinkedIn, and you find similarities and shared views and learn from each other. It's been quite the experience.
You are so different. I mean, it's so refreshing to see sort of your thought process and the strategies that you're employing there at H&O. So it's easy for me to like you.
Thank you, Mark. It's easy to like you too.
You're just wired differently from most structural engineers, which I have had quite a bit of experience with. I worked with a lot of them.
Still a structural engineer by trade, but it's not always like, I almost am fortunate I didn't recognize that, like, I am passionate about structural engineering and designing buildings and developments and all that. Like, I'm not this big technical guy. And I really found my passion is building teams and organizations, and the two of them just combined, right? But like, I don't know that I would have kept this route, which is why I come off as different than another structural engineer. I just realized it later in life.
Well, you're going to be incredibly successful. I'm going to be able to look back and say, I remember when Rents was just getting started and had gotten some good traction, and now look at them. Now they're bigger than Walter P. Moore. I mean, it's...
We'll see. Let's go for it, right? I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. And if I have people like you in the corner helping guide me along the way, it'll be a fun time.
Well, hopefully my knowledge isn't going to become obsolete, although sometimes I feel like it could be. But fortunately, I work with young people and teach, and that makes me have to stay up with what's going on out there in the world,
That's an interesting point. Sometimes it's really like the perspective and the mindset doesn't change, right? Like, the same qualities that drove success in the 80s, 90s, the 2000s, whatever decade you call it, same attributes and qualities like still stay at the top, and they're the ones that drive results. It's really just the platform and the execution and the tweaks and the strategies for the current the current like economy and development or technology. That's the difference, right?
I wouldn't disagree with that.
You would disagree.
No, I say I would not disagree.
Oh, okay. I was like, all right, I got to reframe my thought. I went against Mark here.
Mm-mm.
Um, awesome. So if we go back into your career, I want to get some highlights before we get into the meat
Sure.
of like best practice in business. When did you launch your first business? Was it the Zweig Group?
Well, my first business, I guess as a real business, was my motorcycle shop when I was in college and grad school. There was my buddy, Frank Galanti. He was a fellow student when I was going through the
Mm-hmm.
undergraduate program. Great guy from Chicago, Italian. His parents owned Galante Organ Company. And
Okay.
he and I both had a passion for these three-cylinder Kawasaki two-strokes. And Frank was a speed freak, but he also drove old beat-up Volvos, so he would have fit in New England. But
Yeah,
anyway, um,
they're everywhere up here.
we had another guy who was a finance professor that put the money up and gave us an old Veach oil station. And so we set up this business. We bought and sold used motorcycles, and we had an Indian moped franchise. And that was really my first business.
Come on, you had a franchise?
Yeah, well, you know what a franchise was back then? It was like buy three Indian mopeds, wholesale.
So you
And
had to buy them and then put them on the lot, and then you
yeah,
could
and
like,
then
call
they
yourself
sent
an
you a
Indian dealer,
sign. They
an
gave
Indian
us
motorcycle dealer.
an illuminated sign and everything. That's all it was. I mean, there were no standards or anything you had to meet. It wasn't like McDonald's or anything close to that.
Yeah.
It's what you call a product and trademark franchise. It's like you could be a sporting goods store and sell Timberland shoes, and they give you some decals to slap on the door and a
Yeah.
display that says Timberland. But anyway,
Is
that
there?
was my first real business.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And so, like, after you went to college for like business administration and an MBA, right? That was
That's
your
right.
education.
Yeah, I
Did you
went
go
straight to it.
straight into so you're running this motorcycle franchise, selling motorcycles and doing repairs?
Right.
Did you keep focusing on that business after you graduated? Where'd you go from
No,
there?
no, I didn't at all. I mean, I'd started really early. I bought and sold bicycles on my mom and dad's street corner, then motorcycles. I worked at a shop that sold bikes and motorcycles from the time I was 12 or 13. I worked
Hmm.
for multiple owners. The last one I worked for was a guy who eventually had 10 stores and was a super entrepreneur. But so no,
Love that.
and then I bought and sold cars off the student union bulletin board. I worked with a local junkyard to pick out wrecks that were rebuildable and sold them through my connections to students. I sold bicycles to kids in the dorms and had them sent to me on a bus. I was always doing something to make some money,
Yeah,
you know?
that's the serial entrepreneur, right? Like you didn't choose to be an entrepreneur; just the entrepreneur life chose you at an early age.
It's really sort of true. But anyway, so no, when I got out of school in grad school in 1980, and I had a grad assistantship, which is why I stayed. It was free, and I made $358.95 a month after tax, and I could live on about $250 a month back then.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, it's an important distinction to share that, right? Like you made
yeah,
sure you were living within your means. The
right.
context there.
And then I had my other jobs and my other ventures to make money. But no, when I got out of grad school, I went to work for a consulting firm that was predominantly executive search, but they did some other stuff for contractors and developers. And they had opportunities to work with architects and engineers occasionally. It was based in St. Louis. But their sort of conventional wisdom there was, well, we don't like AE firms. They can't make a decision and they won't pay good fees. And the contractors and developers, you know how they are. They're like bang, bang, bang. They love that. But I
Yeah.
gravitated to that group because, well, first off, before I got seduced away by the world of business, I thought I wanted to be an architect. And
Hmm.
but then I just got to where I made so much money when I was a kid in high school and all that I never looked back. But I had an interest in it to start with in design and architecture. And then I just found the people were a little smarter and more, intellectually stimulating, I have to say. And later on, I came to appreciate the ethics of the design professionals, compared to contractors and developers. And so,
Interesting. I can see from a consulting perspective, just thinking of those different
worlds,
industries, right?
yeah,
Developers are dealing with like typically investment dollars. They're doing high value real estate assets and they're leveraging debt. So there's a lot of money going through those organizations. So
hmm,
the consulting fee feels like such a small incremental number.
yeah,
Contractors, they're big flow through entities. So all of that money that goes to a real estate development flows through them and they're all subcontractor fees, right? And then
right,
so the consulting fee is a small number in their general scheme. And then you come to a design company and for the architect, they're a pass through of a pass through entity of other consultants, but you go to engineering, they're generally it's just their time and their people costs and some software and
exactly.
insurance, right? So it's a bigger egg going after. It feels like a bigger piece of the pie when you're paying the consultant fee.
Yeah, and especially because my rates were never cheap, and I probably told you
Nor
this
should they
story
be.
before. Years ago, I was visiting one of my old clients. It was Carter and Burgess, and I used to work there. They eventually sold out to Jacobs, but I was visiting them. They were our biggest client at the time, and I was seeing this guy I knew who was a structural engineer. He was one of the partners there. He grew up in the town next door to me. Our grandfathers were friends, and we even have a picture of the Strasburger Conservatory graduating class of 1911 with his grandfather next to my grandfather. And
Mm-hmm.
anyways, I'm sitting there talking with him, and he was also a Cornell graduate. He was very proud of that. But
Yeah.
so
Smart
we're
guy, I'm sure.
yeah, he was a smart guy. But anyway, he was looking at some proposal that we had made. He's like, at the time, my billing rate was $400 an hour, and he's like, $400 an hour. He goes, I can't charge that. I can only charge $200 an hour. And I said, hey, do me a favor. He goes, what's that? And they were in the DFW area. The company
Yeah.
was based in Fort Worth. We're sitting in their Fort Worth office. I said, get out the DFW area yellow pages. So he did, and they came in 2 volumes back then. And I said, look up consulting engineers. And he looks them up. And I said, how many are there? And he's just like, page, page, page. Because I don't know, there's thousands of them. I said, okay, now look up structural engineers. How many of those are there? Well, there's hundreds of them here. I said, okay, now look up management consultants. He looks up management consultants. I said, now look up specialized AE industry management consultants. No, I don't see any. I said, exactly. Now you know why I can charge $400 an hour and your billing rate's $200 an hour.
What a great lesson. What a great way to put that. Yeah, it's scarcity, right?
No,
You're finding the
exactly.
niche. That's how. Like people know why
I,
they're coming to you.
I swear, though, that was exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, I started there, and then I got recruited by one of my clients after 3 years there, and I built a nice little business, doing better than most of my friends. I remember thinking, gosh, if I could make 40,000 a year between my wife and myself, my wife wouldn't have to work. We could have 2 new cars and a new house, and everything would be great.
Hmm.
Anyway, I got recruited by one of my clients, and wanted me to move to Memphis. And this guy was a structural engineer, couple hundred person firm. We did MEP. We got into architecture when I was there. First, we bought a firm, then we sold
So did
that.
they hired you to be in-house at this firm?
Right. I was the head of marketing and HR first for what they called Division One, which was
Ah,
Memphis and Little Rock. And then after that, well, we called it Director of Project Development. My boss told me, we don't market here. Don't ever say that. That's a dirty word. We're not, it's not ethical. Um,
how'd
but
you
anyway,
respond to that? I know you're a big advocate for marketing and you don't think in
I
general
didn't
the
care.
AE world does enough of it. So
No, I
I'm
don't.
interested back then, how did you respond?
I just did what I was told. I said, fine, I'll call myself project development. It doesn't really matter. And we also did asbestos abatement consulting, which was just starting to get off the ground. And interest rates were like 18%, and nobody was hiring us for structural engineering. We were taking our structural engineers and sending them out in the field with film containers and plans to scrape samples and mark where they took them, and then send those off to Georgia Tech to be looked at under the TEM. And anyway, so my boss, though, my client, he really wasn't my boss. He was the executive vice president. I reported to the president. Anyway, after about 4 months there, I got the job of director of project development and HR for the overall company, and they'd lost a bunch of money.
I gotta talk about something there. I think
Sure.
like their perspective, right, on that, on marketing. I
Yeah.
still feel like marketing is like widely underutilized in the AE space.
No, I
It's
don't
one of the biggest
disagree.
levers I'm excited about pulling going forward. Is that fundamentally the industry just hasn't spent the time to learn about proper marketing and like how it can actually like
Yep.
raise the level, the perceived value of your company, how it protects you in a downturn, how it like creates demand for people to come to you that you know you can help. It's like such a
Right.
vital organizational like sector of any business, and it really is widely underused.
You're right. And I mean, it does so much more than just bring work in. It brings clients so you can be selective about who you work for. It gets you better fees because you've got lots of clients who want to hire you. I mean, it
For
brings
sure.
people to you that are good people. It just does a million different things. But anyway, so this company, they,
The people thing, sorry, the people thing is the most important. Like um, when I look at AE firms, they have business development roles, right? They don't call them
right,
sales, but we all know business development is sales or it's principal
exactly.
led sales.
Yep.
The problem with sales, you can be effective in this industry because it's really ABM, right? Account based marketing, which is basically
Hmm.
sales. The client pool is very easy to identify, and you just go straight to them. You build a relationship, you help them, you connect the dots. Now you have a relationship.
Yep.
The flaw that I see is these companies scale on those sales, but they never create the marketing engine to attract the talent or people like value align. They don't work on their culture, and they don't clarify or create the line of talent that wants to work at the company. So they drive sales, and then they have to hire, and they have to settle for their hires, and then like you're creating a ton of culture debt.
Then mediocrity just settles in. I mean, it's so
It settles
true,
in.
you know.
It's it's a
But
hard ditch to dig out of.
if you have really great marketing, then selling's super easy. I mean, you're just helping
Exactly.
people. And that's the whole point, you don't have to sell. Nobody's going to hire architects and engineers impulsively. I mean, they hire them because they need them. It's not
Yes.
like, oh, I saw this ad and I thought I'd hire one. Um,
Who's the quote that says like no one buys a quarter inch drill bit because they love quarter inch drill bits. They buy
yeah,
it because they need a quarter inch hole, right? It's
exactly.
like the same thing. No one's hiring a structural engineering firm because we designed the best column. It's because they're trying to create a building.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's a necessary function,
exactly.
service to meet the end goal. But so, in any case, though, these guys had lost a whole bunch of money the year before. They bought Intergraph CAD. That was the new thing, and
Hmm.
we weren't using it very effectively at all. We were doing things like designing aluminum siding for brick buildings for the Huntsville Division Corps of Engineers. And so they lost, I think it was about 400,000, and they went out on the floor to seven of us young guys and said, "Hey, if you want to buy into this company, now's your chance." And so I took that opportunity, and they co-signed my loan at Union Planners Bank. I was like 26 maybe at the time, maybe
Okay.
27. And
And so they had a dip because they had a bad year, made a bad decision in this acquisition, and then because of that, they opened up and gave you an
yep,
opportunity to buy in. And
that's
what
it.
gave you the confidence to buy in? Did that not feel risky since they had a down year, or
And
what was the opportunity?
they also ran off some principals who didn't really get it as far as the executive VP, my mentor there, Irving Weiss, as far as, sort of how he thought. They weren't progressive enough for him. They weren't
Got it.
business oriented enough. So we had to pay them off too. That was another
Oh, I
part.
see. So this wasn't just like giving you an opportunity to buy in. This was really a restructuring of the leadership
Yes,
to set the new direction.
it really
Very
was.
cool.
And, but did it seem risky? Hell, I didn't even know. I mean, I had my MBA and all, but I mean, all I knew was that if you weren't a principal, you didn't get a decent company car. I had one, but it was like a worn out Le Mans with 100,000 miles. And if I became a principal, I
It
got a
doesn't
new,
shock me that
you
you're
know,
focused on the car in this whole transition.
I got a new Nissan Metro, you know.
Hey, they're going to give me a car if I made principal. Of course, I got to do that.
Actually, the first one I got was a new car, was a Dodge Colt. But then shortly after, I got a Maxima from one of those partners that they ran off. But anyway, so you got a car and you got your typing done faster because we had like these cranky typing pools always run by some chain smoking older woman. And if you weren't a partner, your typing got stuffed on the bottom of the pile. And it'd be like you'd wait 2 or 3 days to get a letter back. I'm like, I can't
They're
do that.
just typing all day, but you're at the bottom the whole time.
Yeah. But if you were a principal, man, your typing was like that, you know? So risky,
Unbelievable.
I didn't even think about it, honestly. I mean, if you said no and you had a chance to buy in, you would be thought of as a short timer, as, it's, you're not on board with the program, I think. I think a lot of owners still feel that way if they offer stock to somebody and they don't take it. That's a real sign of maybe lack of commitment or concern,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Put yourself in the employee's shoes too. Like I would say, I certainly wouldn't say yes to buying into every company. So if that's a real
Well,
assessment
yeah,
and it's like where the rubber hits the road, right? If that
mhm,
was the decision that made them really think about their future with the company, then from both sides, they know that that's probably the end of the road. You're right. But it's
yeah.
either you're in or you're out if you're saying yes or no to equity, I think.
I think so. And, it was immediately rewarded with higher pay. I mean, there's just it seemed like a really low risk decision. It worked out fine. I didn't own it all that long. And then I got, meanwhile, I had been talking with another old client of mine, and he had joined Carter and Burgess from a company called 3D International. He was
Hmm.
the head of engineering for 3DI, and they did a lot of high rise buildings. They were based in Houston,
Gotta
and
love high rise.
particularly in like Saudi Arabia. And Russell Laird was his name, and he was constantly trying to recruit me to go to Carter and Burgess. And I just said, no, 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 it's great here. I'm happy. Finally, one day
Hmm.
I said, okay, I'll come see you. And so I did. And lo and behold, a few months later, I ended up getting an offer that was paid me a whole lot more money than I was making in Memphis. And we loaded up the truck and moved to the DFW area.
Hmm.
And
It gave you a nicer car.
Well, I got a
The
car
new model.
allowance. I bought a new 944 Porsche though. At the time,
Oh, nice.
I could have had a company Impala because you wouldn't get a Caprice unless you were a full principal, and we had associates and associate principals, so there was a pecking order in the vehicle. So they said you can
Yeah.
have the Impala or you can get the car allowance. I took the car allowance and bought the 944, which created some controversy there immediately. The new guy, who is this guy? And he's driving a
Yeah,
Porsche.
showing up in a Porsche.
Yeah,
Yeah. I do love Porsches. It's a car that
I,
I will
I do
own
too.
one day. I haven't dove into the cars in a long time, but
Well,
it's something in the future. I'll probably grab one of those.
we've had six of them. I had three 911s, a 944. We had a Macan Turbo, and now we have a Cayenne. And my wife is like a Porsche person.
Love
She,
that. I'm gonna reach out to you for Porsche advice.
oh, dude. Anytime.
um,
And it's money in the bank, Rents. You're smart with your money. I mean, they don't depreciate. Just buy a used 911 coupe. And 3 years from now, the thing's going to be worth 40% more than you paid for it. You'll be driving it for free. I mean, it's
Well, if that's the case, see, this is where I look at a car as like I am not making an investment. So right now I want to
Right.
allocate all my money towards things that make money.
I get it. You're
Um,
smart.
so if they make money, then maybe I have to reframe my my time frame.
But
Maybe
that's how I ended up at Carter and Burgess. And again, I started as the director of HR, and
yeah,
within probably 6 months, I was also the head of marketing there.
marketing. Yeah,
And
because
so,
you're sitting in HR telling them they don't know how to market, and they're like, "All right, well, I guess you can run marketing."
well, they thought I could sell. I mean, I was good at
Yeah,
recruiting. I could sell people on coming to work there. So that's sort of how I got into that.
love that.
And I was lucky. I hired some really good people in the marketing department. One of them was a woman named Susie Peden, and she was unbelievably smart. And she came from another engineering firm. And she really came up with the whole idea that we needed to reposition the firm based on market sectors instead of geographic offices and disciplines that sort
Mm-hmm.
of competed with each other. I mean, this was really early on, too. So we're talking like 85, 86.
Mm-hmm.
And she was really smart, and that was pivotal to the company's positioning for the future.
Yeah, I think that's great. Were they run as cost centers or profit centers? The different regions.
They were run as profit centers, although eventually the CEO got so tired of the complaining of the branch offices about their overhead allocation. He said, "Fine, I'll take all your overhead here in Fort Worth, and you guys will still lose money." And
Yeah, and like you said, it can be competitive, right? Like, what if
yep.
happens if my client in Boston does work in Arkansas and that's in your neck of the woods? Like, that's where I'm
Uh,
from the lessons that I've been told. I haven't had to do that yet. Is you run them as cost centers is like gives you the longest run. You can get away with
Absolutely.
profit centers for a while, but cost centers maintain alignment in
Yeah,
perpetuity, right?
maybe if you do like construction materials testing or geotech, you can have every location be its own thing, but it's still
Yeah,
hard,
that makes sense.
you know. But anyway, so
The
that was Carter and Burgess, and that was a good experience. I was there 3 years, and I was successful in my
And
job.
so you went to these two firms, you worked in the AE,
Yeah,
you went from motorcycles to consulting, found your alignment and kind of passion for the AE world,
yep.
worked internally at a few companies. And is this about the time you launched the Zweig Group? Is that where we're running?
Yeah, we're getting near that. So there was one interim step in there. I started writing for a newsletter, a management newsletter for our industry in the mid '80s, and I got involved in a couple different professional associations that served our industry, like SMPS. There was another one at that time called PSMA, Professional Services Management Association, and I was involved in those. And then I wrote for PSMJ, and
Okay.
I got recruited by the owner of that newsletter slash company to
Frank?
Frank to be his
Yeah, we love Frank. Frank's awesome.
to be well. He wasn't too awesome in my case, but anyway, to be executive vice president there, and so that's why I moved to Boston. I figured if it didn't work out, it was either going to get my PhD from Harvard or somewhere if they'd let me in, because I always wanted to be a professor, and
Yeah.
so that was my plan. Or I'd start my own business, which I had the business plan. I wrote it up in November of '86, and I just had it sitting there on the shelf. And I won't go into all the details, but let's just say it didn't work out. And that's when I decided I would never work for anybody else again,
Okay.
and depend on them, and set up my own business July 13 of 1988. And in fact, Stasiowski was an early client of mine. I had him
Oh,
as a
that's great.
client. I had Carter and Burgess as a client, and I had VHB as a client.
All
And,
right.
and you know who they are.
Yeah, big names.
Yeah. So that was the start of it. I worked out of the back room. I had an old two-family
And so it
house.
started, this was pure consulting at that
Pure
time. Is that right?
consultant. Yeah. And I,
And you've really grown. So it's morphed into the business it is today. That's really
yeah,
cool.
absolutely. And so, I worked out of the back room of my house. I had a 2-family. I bought the second cheapest house in Natick when I moved to the Boston area. It was unbelievable. You should have seen it. Lime green asbestos shingles. The whole yard was paved, and it had a decorative chain link fence around the whole thing. It was like an industrial compound.
What's a decorative chain link fence look like? We're gonna have to Google that and put it in on
It
the
wasn't
YouTube video.
decorative. Okay, I'm just saying. It had suspended ceilings in every room. It was an 1870 little Victorian workers' cottage, which I ended up redoing as I lived in it. But so I started out there, and then within a month, I got an office in downtown Natick. I lived in downtown Natick. I could walk to it, and I was above Russ's Lunch, right there on Route 27 at Main Street in Natick.
Sounds convenient.
It was super convenient. It was like 3 blocks from my house. I could ride my bike to work, and my accountant was located between my house and my office. I paid $200 a month rent for that, and I was above this diner owned by a Greek guy named Costa, and he would sit there and smoke over the grill, while he's cooking your burgers, and the ashes would fall into it. It smelled like a hamburger.
Frowned upon today, but
yeah, it was. But anyway, so then I started hiring people. Fred White worked. I hired him as an intern at PSMJ doing graphic design. Brilliant guy. And so I hired Fred, and I knew he was going to be a key part of our business, and proved to be an excellent partner in the end. We had totally different skill sets, which makes for a good partnership, as you know.
It really does. Yeah, you need different skill sets in a partnership, right?
And we said we're just going to grow this thing as fast as we can and blow it out. And 10 years from now, we'll sell it. And it did take us 16 years in the end to sell it. But that's exactly what we did. I mean, we grew like crazy. We grew by 30% a year for the first 13 years. And it was pretty simple.
Phenomenal.
I mean, we just did all the things that we advocated our clients do. We were open book management. We sold stock to key employees and let them finance 100% of it.
I love that you said open book management. Like, we're big advocates for open book financial management. And I hear stories like yours. I mean, Jack Stack, SRC Holdings, the Great Game of Business is where we kind of found the system to roll out. But I'm shocked that it's not more commonplace today. I would not consider running a business any other way. Like there would be I would never consider it.
Why would you want to have like an airplane with no gauges on it that anybody sees but one person? I mean, it just seems really dumb.
It's silly. It feels silly once you see the other perspective, but that is the standard in the US culture.
Oh yeah, it is.
The safe thing is to go work for a company and have absolutely no visibility into the financial stability of the company.
No idea.
You just trust that it's good.
Yeah, you're like
most of the people running businesses don't really know either, right?
Right. So, we just did, and then we just spent 30% more every year on direct mail. And that was basically our strategy was pretty simple. We had these, what we called products, and we had consulting. Products were books, newsletters, survey reports, seminars, events, tapes, things like that. And we would spend 40% of the revenue on those products on direct mail. And then that made the phone ring with consulting opportunities. And you just ramp that up.
Let's go through that one more time. So you looked at those products and you looked at the revenue of those products.
Right.
And then you used 40% of that product revenue as your direct mail.
Yep.
And those were the low cost buy opportunities for your prospective clients that would then upsell into consulting.
Point of entry, right? Exactly. Yeah, I mean, one time we did a little study and looked at, because we also had a database on a wide area network. Eventually we had something like 7 offices, and it was one relational database that had every single contact and purchase from us in it. And that was super, super critical. And Fred White engineered that along with a guy named Mike Meechan, who's brilliant. He was on the strategic MIS committee for John Hancock Financial Services, Harvard grad, just super brilliant. And Fred and Mike Meechan worked
Wow.
that out. We were way ahead of our time on that. I mean, it was
Yeah, that's amazing.
so, just spending that money. So the products business was basically 40% of the business. So 40% of 40% is about 16% of revenue in total went into direct mail and other marketing efforts. And if you
Did you
just
market the
spent
products, or is it all kind
marketing
of
the
the same,
products,
right? Because the products were the entry level buy to the
because
consulting. So
we
that was the
never,
full company marketing. Yep.
you could count on one hand the number of initiatives we made to market consulting, but the consulting just came in across the transom with
Yeah.
that.
It's just a
Uh,
part of it. Once you built the trust, getting the trust is the biggest thing.
It is. And, the other thing we did, Rents, that was really pivotal is we had a shared business planning process. The company still does it today, where you involve every single employee. And, we'd have 3 days of meetings, and all the profit centers, which we didn't treat as profit centers, but all the sort of units, I should say, the line units, would each have to present their plan. And their plan had to have at least 3 new things to sell every year and 3 new ways to sell them. And so that just kept us constantly coming out with new, which you had to do if you want to grow. It's not just the marketing. Give me
Yes.
something new to sell. And
Yeah. I mean, you are ahead of your time, like in thinking through that. Um, that's like revenue R&D. You're like forcing
yep,
people to test products, and like if 30% of them hit, those are a lot
right.
of new products every single year, right? So you're allocating a certain amount of your capacity just to trying new things.
I wish I
That's
could take the
that,
credit for all this stuff, but the truth is, Fred was so pivotal in it. He managed the product business and then all those sort of back end
really cool.
functions. And it was, you know, he was brilliant. But we did share. I
Yeah, I
mean,
would
that's
say
my
so.
philosophy. I was
That's
sort of
really
out
great.
there
And
as,
so
as the
this
front
sounds
end.
like I can see this engine being really fruitful, and I imagine like your competition, like you said, you were in a niche, right? So like you don't have like this laundry list of other providers that, so you're kind of creating a category of one as you market yourself.
Well, there were
Now, did you
some,
find that you were, yeah, there are some, of course.
right.
Did you find that you generally had excess opportunity, like consulting opportunities, to where you could be selective in who
Oh,
you
yeah,
chose to work with?
absolutely. My philosophy was I don't negotiate on fees.
Yeah.
We're going to do it. This is the way we do it. You have people call up and say, I'd like a facilitator for our strategic planning retreat. And I'd be, we don't facilitate retreats. Well, what do you mean? You're consultants, aren't you? Yeah, but we don't facilitate retreats. Now, if you want us to help you with your business planning process, we're glad to do that, and we'll be at your meetings, but we're not
Which is so
facilitating.
smart, right? Because if you go run a retreat and there's no business plan or strategic planning process, how are you going to actually provide value in a
Right.
retreat?
And you don't
You're
know
just an
anything.
event planner. You're just an
Yeah.
event coordinator, and that's it.
You haven't done your homework. You don't really know the business. You don't know what their clients are saying, their
Did you provide
employees.
a service that was valuable to them, maybe for that block of time, but you
Oh,
didn't create compounding value in the future, which is really where your lever was, right?
you know it. I mean, sure, we had a very clear scope. If you hire us, we're going to do this. We're going to interview key employees. We'll have an employee survey. We're going to benchmark all your financials. We're going to talk to 50 of your clients. We're going to write up this
Mm-hmm.
big report that details everything we found in it, all the issues that you need to address, and what our recommendations are and the rationale for it. And then we're going to have a meeting after the owners all get to see that and read that. So we get all on the same page about sort of where things are now. And of course, that allowed you to get much better fees, and do a better
Mm-hmm.
job. I mean, the company does a lot of it today, and I'm sure we're not the cheapest by any means, and
Nor should you be.
yeah, and get some really great long-term relationships with these people where they feel like you're not just a parasite that's sort of sucking on the
Yeah. So
lifeblood out of
from I went through a mergers and acquisitions like certification where it's a certified value growth advisor. So I've looked into the consulting world and really thought through it. I've hired consultants before,
Yep.
and something that I really came to appreciate is the success of a consultant. There's a number of things, but when it comes to client selection, it's actually the skill to evaluate whether the client you're about to work with is actually willing to like learn and change and move forward. Because if you're just being hired to a
Yeah.
client that's unwilling to change and actually look inward and make, like, it has to start at the leadership. And if they're unwilling to admit their flaws, you're never going to get by that.
Yep. No question about it.
No question. It's a hard thing to admit, and I give the same advice to employees or people that are working for a company and feeling like they're running against a ceiling in their career. It's like I talk to them and ask questions about the company, and I advise them, like, you need to go ask the hard questions to your leadership team now to see if they're willing to change, and you're going to know whether your future's here or not based on their response.
You're right, but most people aren't courageous enough to do that, unfortunately. That
Yeah.
might be your orientation or mine, but it's not typical. People are so fearful, you know?
Well, we got to help them. That's part of the reason for the podcast is we're trying to share
Yeah,
the perspective and build that confidence, right? Like
exactly.
if you
No,
ask
that's
about how
good.
does somebody become the founder of Inc. 500, Inc. 5000 companies, they started selling bikes in their dorm and motorcycles in college, right? Like everybody's got a different path. And hopefully if you listen and you talk to enough people, you build that community, you build the confidence. The
Yeah,
confidence doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes because you've put in the work and the thought
that's
and
true. I mean, it's
identified
just
where
like,
you're trying to go.
yeah, it's just like public speaking. I gave a lot of talks when I was younger, and the only way I could do it and feel good is if I was super, super well prepared. And, then,
Preparation's key.
yeah, and, it's just exactly what you're saying here, too. If you want to have your own business, you got to get yourself prepared
Exactly.
psychologically
Yeah.
more than
It
anything.
comes back to the habits. Like, what did you do to put yourself in a position to succeed? And if your daily habits don't reflect that, you haven't identified and worked on developing the skills necessary to be successful, well, then, yeah, you shouldn't expect to be successful. But you
That's
should
true.
have confidence going into it if you know you're doing all of the right things, right?
Yeah, I'm a great example of not doing the right things these days. So I,
Willing
I
to learn
screw
and grow,
around so
for sure.
much, man. I took, you know, got up early today. I had to take the kids to school and stop by Walgreens on the way to buy stuff that they wanted to give their friends for Halloween or whatever. And then I took my 74 Carmen Gia out to one of my friends to do some work on it. Rushed back, had a phone call related to Zweig Group. Then I had another friend of mine come and pick up my absolute pile of crap 1960 Beetle that we're going to get going. It probably hasn't run in at least 40 years, and we're going to resuscitate it. And anyway, so I've wasted plenty of time today. I can assure you. My habit.
Hey, the stories bring all context. I love the stories. I want I want to dive into some kind of practical kind of advice or perspectives that could help, say, business leaders or emerging leaders in the AEC world. And so I want to get to organizational best practices, but I think to get there, we should talk about, like, what are the most common flaws? Like, where are people banging their head against that brick wall in the AEC world that you see?
Oh gosh, I mean, well, first off, I'm not trying to be disagreeable, but I just hate that term AEC. Although they use it, it's Y group these days and force me
Do you
to.
think you should say AE world because
Yeah,
C and AE are completely different? I agree.
that's that's honestly what I think. I mean, they try to say, well, C could be for consulting. I go, yeah, but it's not what everybody thinks. They think architecture, engineering, and construction, and they're such different animals that I can't even throw them in one pile.
I would agree with you.
But anyway,
Mhm.
so we can say it though for the purpose of this discussion. The common
We'll say AE firms.
Con-
There we go.
con- okay, if we're looking at AE firms, I mean, they seem like they've got a lot of the same problems. They don't charge enough. They set their fees up based on effort instead of based on trying to do it on fixed fees where they can efficiencies rewarded.
Yep.
Hourly
Value
efficiency.
based pricing rather than cost based.
Yeah, they don't have create real opportunities for their people, and then they wonder why good people leave. well, we look at everybody's pay once a year and we've budgeted 3.5% for raises. And if you're really outstanding, Rents, you could get 5. And if you're really mediocre, you could get 2.5. Okay. It's like, no, that's not going to do it for good people.
No.
They have way too many titles and not enough real meaningful differentiation in roles, in my opinion. All the different levels of engineer and senior engineer and project engineer and
do you have any advice you could share on like maybe somebody that's done the roles well? Like what kind of, and obviously it's probably broad to talk through an entire organizational structure, but.
Yeah, I mean, the less titles, the better. That's as far as I'm concerned. I can't stand them. And then people are upset because somebody got named an associate and they're not. And we can have associate meetings where they all sit around and gripe and say, we need better soft drink selection in the company lunchroom or whatever. So you see a lot of that. I mean, you see a lot of the sort of same mentality. The principals hang out with the other principals and isolate themselves from the rest of the workers. Their offices are separate. Their doors are closed. They hang out with each other. They don't bond enough with the people, in my opinion. That's a problem. Their marketing is totally inconsistent. They don't really understand it. It's too much bragging. Me, 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 me. Here's my latest project. Not enough really thought-provoking content.
That's one of I pick on that one a lot, is that marketing is not just posting a picture of the buildings you do and thinking people are going to say, if I do that building, I'm going to come to you to design it.
Exactly. I mean, you show you have insight and personality. That's far more important in my mind. And it differentiates you. But so the marketing's mediocre. It's Casper milk toast. It's inconsistent in its quality. They don't spend enough on it because we tried that once and it didn't work. It's like, who said it's going to work after one time? Who says everything is measurable either?
Totally. Something you mentioned there I'd like to expand on is you mentioned like keeping good people or providing opportunity.
Yeah.
This isn't just to the AE space, but a lot of companies don't have a vision. They don't have a strategic plan. So no one that works at the company knows what the company's trying to become in the next 5 years.
Right.
And if you haven't created a vision for the company, your employees don't know where their career is going. They don't know how it fits inside of the plan because there's no plan.
Well, if they have one, nobody knows what it is. Like even the CEO has to look it up if you ask him what it is. And then it says something like, we'll be a leading, innovative, cost-effective solutions provider.
Yeah, world class, right?
Yeah. Improve the quality of the built environment through innovative technical services, or whatever. It just sounds like bullshit.
Branding statement. Yep.
Yeah, and it does not really define like, hey, we want to be a $20 million revenue business by the year 2030 or whatever, something that's real. And what does that mean for you if we do that? I think you're right on with that. The business planning is awful. There's no real mission. There's no real strategies that people can clearly articulate really about anything. Like, how do we have high quality? How do we ensure that we're actually innovative when we should be? How do we, recruit the best people? I mean, they can't articulate any of it,
Yeah. You got to work on the business. Those are a lot of hard answers.
Yeah.
And it's a wheel, right? There's no like one path. You got to kind of, that's when I talk a lot about balanced organizations. Like, at different levels, you have to have completely different strategies on like, how are you going to drive talent to your organization? Like, what kind of opportunities are you providing? Like your operations, your quality assurance, your marketing and sales, like they have to be at different levels as you scale, and you got to raise, the whole ship has to come up, right?
And the processes are inevitably change because at first you can do everything. And as you grow, obviously you can't.
Yes.
And, and I think that's in itself, a lack of trust for other people is at the core of a lot of the problems that firms have and why they don't grow. The owners just don't 100%. Trust people.
Yep.
to perform.
It's
So
like it's a trust thing, but then like an unwillingness to look inward
yep,
on like how did we create this lack of trust, right? Because like micromanaging can outwardly like express I don't trust you, and then so they don't want to make a decision or take a leap of faith, so they come back to you for every little decision in the business, rather than say like you got to create a set of guidelines and expectations in context and let them go, and you have clarifying conversations along the way, but you can never like strike the hammer over somebody actually taking action on like agreed upon like
so
context,
true.
right?
So true. So yeah, I mean, improving these companies, I mean, in a way, like our business was really easy. I mean, if you think
Yeah.
about it, because the level of business acumen is so low and the dysfunctionality and sort of misconceptions about things are so great
Mm-hmm.
that it's just not that hard to go into almost any company in this business and figure out a way to make it better, you know?
Yeah. So for let's say for organizational leaders that have tuned in to today's episode, like what do they do next if they're listening and like, yeah, we have some of these flaws, they want to make a change. Like, what advice do you have for them? Where do we send them to?
Well, it starts with the business planning process. I mean, to me, that's the perfect vehicle to
Yep.
sort of organize these changes and set the priorities. So, really, that's what I always start out with, whether it's a new company or an existing company. I'm going to
Yep.
start with that. And as you said, I
There-
mean, that goes from the broad philosophical stuff down to the very specific action plans of what you're going to do and who's going to do it and how are they going to do it and by when.
that is so on point. To share a little of my story, we were growing my family steel business, and I was an avid learner, self-starter, like reading every book. If I had a marketing challenge, I was just reading every marketing book, sales book, management, whatever it was. And after years, we had success in growing, and I felt sometimes we were successful despite our flaws. And I had all this business knowledge, but I would pull a string here and something would go down here, and then I go fix that and pull that string, and then something else would fall down. I felt like I was just starting in the middle, and I was like, where I have all
Mm-hmm.
this knowledge, this business warehouse know-how. Where do I start?
That's a good
And
analogy. What you just described there, I can imagine that fully.
you can picture it, right? It's
Yeah.
it's literally tangible. I just felt like I was like on a seesaw. It was like trying to be on a seesaw by yourself. You're just
Yep.
going all around, and that's when I found that the certified value growth advisor program, and I got exposed to mergers and acquisitions, and that taught me how to look at organizational balance and value and opportunity. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's what showed me you need to start with a business plan. And that's the mission, the vision, the values, and the strategy. That's really where it comes down to. You got to start there.
Yeah, I love M&A, by the way, and I've done a lot of it over my career, including buying my own companies and going all the way
Love that.
back to the first San Francisco office was a little company we bought in 1990. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I love it. I just love it. I think there's a lot of conventional wisdom out there I totally disagree with when it comes to M&A, like buying successful companies and always looking for cultural compatibility. And everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that's great." I worked for Jerry Allen when he was running Carter and Burgess, and we did like something like 19 acquisitions over the years. And his
Wow.
philosophy was, "You want cultural compatibility? Give me a 6 to 9 month payback period on the deal. I'll show you cultural compatibility." We love distressed properties because I love companies in trouble. The
Yeah.
employees are glad to see us when we show up. They're not
Yes.
resentful that we're changing things from what they have right now. You
So
know?
I mergers and I see mergers and acquisitions. Really, acquisitions are a part of our strategic growth plan. We're going to look to start buying businesses in about 2 years. We're trying to get to a certain size before we turn that on.
Sure,
And when
makes
I
sense.
think of building, like you said, you don't want to be the only leader that knows how the business makes money. We don't want to be the only people that knows the value of mergers and acquisitions and how to successfully integrate a company. But when an entire team is invited into the strategic planning, understands the design process, and has open book financial management, that's an entire team that knows how to integrate. And when we buy another company, that whole firm is likely not going to have open book management, not have the strategy,
Exactly.
not have the design process. And we're going to lay that
Yep.
all out and show them their financial statement and ours. I don't know how they're not going to want buy-in, because their
Yes.
upside is going to be
Right.
significant when they join, right?
I believe you. I think that's critical. I think that sounds like a good plan. And I
We're
believe
excited
there's
for it.
a
I like
lot of
M&A.
opportunity there. I worked with a guy once years ago who was a branch office manager for a company that had about 90 employees. He had
Mm-hmm.
something like an 11 or 12 person office. And he came to me with this grand plan to grow this company. At the time, he wanted to take it to a $75 million company. And he was going to
Love that
take
ambition.
he was going to throw away everything they did other than transportation and focus it all on every single aspect of transportation. And he did it. And it was a guy named Brian Larson. He was with a company called JBM, and then they changed their name to Trans Systems. That was part of his grand plan. And he
Very
just
cool.
got other people to throw in with him. He'd go to other companies and they'd combine and they trade equity. He just built the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing on equity trading and built a
Yeah.
mega company out of that.
Right. Yeah,
It,
it absolutely can be that, right? Like every acquisition, it doesn't necessarily have to be a cash exchange. It can be, there's different terms. It's stock. They're getting buy-in.
buy
Like
into
think
this
about,
vision, as you said.
yeah,
I mean, it's
you're buying into a successful business model if you're building it right. Like
yeah,
we just went through all the challenges that you have in running a business. If there's a partner out there that wants all those things and sees an alignment with a company that has those things, that's like a perfect merger, right?
exactly. And
Helps everybody.
it was amazing to witness him. I'm not going to say it wasn't without its struggles, but the guy did it.
Yeah,
They're huge today.
mergers and acquisitions, it sounds great when we're talking about it. It is not simple. It is
No.
very difficult. It is very challenging, but it can be extremely fulfilling and fruitful when done well.
So I was no, there was a company whose board I was on, and I got paid really handsomely. This goes back, like maybe
Mm-hmm.
25 years ago. I got paid $100,000 to go to 6 board meetings a year, which is I think it's a pretty good
Yeah,
engagement.
it's pretty good. It's a pretty
You
good
know,
gig.
but every time I'd go to their meetings, I felt like the life force was sucked out of me. So after
Oh
about a
no.
year of this, they would not do what I thought they needed to do. They just would not manage their business effectively. And so it just dawned on me, I'd go to these meetings and you had to travel quite a distance from Boston to get there. They were either in Southern California or Honolulu, and it just sucked the life force out of me. And so I was at one of these meetings. I got there, and there was this giant conference room with their logo in every single part of it. It reminded me of the book, Tom Wolfe book. If you ever read A Man in Full about the real estate developer, it's a
I
great
haven't.
book. It's about a real estate developer who tanks. His name's Charlie Croker, and
Okay.
his logo's on everything. It just But anyway, they
I
had
gotta
this
check it out.
they had this long buffet full of peeled fruit. Okay, and it was just so decadent. And I'm like, who peeled the fruit? And you open these doors at the end of the conference room. There were 3 secretaries back there cowering, waiting for someone to order them to do something. And it just the whole thing was sick. And these guys were losing money, and they would not act. And anyway, so I told the CEO I was quitting their board. He just could not believe it. Well, why
Couldn't
would you
believe it.
do that? I said, because I only have so much life force, and you guys are draining it. Okay, I can't go through
Uh,
this anymore. I come back and I need like a week to recover from these horrible meetings, and you're not doing what you need to do. Anyway, we looked him up the other day. I was telling my wife this story. I thought, I wonder how big those guys are. They're about half the size they were.
they're about
This is
half the size, so they've just
25
been
years ago.
riding the down slope.
Yep.
The what bold predictions do you have for the industry over the next 5-10 years?
Bold predictions. That's a good question. Well, I think we've gotten to be a lot more successful. I mean, we're going to forget the current recession fears that people have. I mean, there's still way more needs than there are people to actually do the work and
Hundred
firms to
percent.
accomplish the work. So I'm not sure the next 20 years are going to be a whole lot different. I mean, it's going to be labor shortage, difficulty in keeping a real team together, instead of people all wanting to go out on their own. We're in such a fragmented industry. We're very slow to learn anything, because there's just too many companies out there. It's not like the automakers, Tesla came out and they started doing things differently. And now, everybody's trying to emulate them, and it sort of lit a fire under their rear end. But they've got just these few big companies that when they figure out how to do something, then they all do it. And our industry's not like that,
So it's more, we're challenging the industry to be more innovative. What are we going to do moving forward, right? We're going to change.
Yeah, I think what it's going to be is more of the same thing, and the well-managed companies that have a real purpose and really understand how to engage people, that they've got to be part of a team, that they benefit if the place performs. I think that's what those companies are going to continue to be more successful than the rest, which don't seem to have any recognition or appreciation for those things.
Talent wins, right?
Yeah.
Talent wins. And I love the takeaway from what you guys did at the Zweig Group was challenging each team within your company to come up with like 3 new products to test, right? I think taking that lesson and applying it to the AE field and your teams, like how can we improve, coming up with new ideas every quarter, implementing them once, twice a year, 3 times a year, trying to find ways to innovate. But you really want to keep your talent.
We have to get out.
Similar.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have to get outside of our industry. It's just too insular and too behind the times in my mind. I mean, just like you mentioned, Jack Stack, 100%. Work and all that. I mean,
if all you do is study AE firms for like guidance and thoughts on how to run an AE firm, you're going to be staring down a tunnel. You got to look across all industries and try to grab the best practices. And it stimulates creative thinking. It gives you new ideas. You got to do
absolutely.
What do we expect from you in the next 5 years? It seems like you just keep going. You're Mark Zweig Inc., which we didn't even have time to talk about. Design, construction, development firm. That's still going. You're a professor. You're a Vistage chair. What are you doing for the next 5 years?
Well, we're winding down the real estate and construction business entirely. We gave up our license. We still have one big property, but we sold most of our properties. We had about 18 million. We had about 22 million in rental properties. We got 4 now. So we really cleared out the decks, and I just want to do less of everything. I'm just enjoying every moment of my life. I'm fooling around with old VWs. That's my thing right now. I just finished this book. It just came back from the printer 2 days ago. Confessions of an Entrepreneur. I want to see that be successful, although nobody reads anymore. So that's going to be a challenge.
I'm an audiobook guy.
Yeah.
So we'll have to get it on audiobook.
I know. Everybody's telling me that. We've got just working with my students and seeing them be successful. I just went and I had a former student of mine from graduated 2009, so that's 13 years ago. And he and his partner just built this unbelievable event center he wanted me to see. And I was just so blown away by the level of thought and planning and the financial performance of it and their plans for the future. Now they're going to build a $36 million hotel or $38 million hotel. I mean, I was just so proud to see
That is amazing.
Yeah,
you should be like, what an accomplishment. That's awesome to see.
I mean, this guy said he was going to do this, and I was skeptical, but he did it. I mean, he just methodically planned and pulled it together and just got the resources, and and it's just, I don't know. I just love seeing that. And, so I spend a lot of time with my students on the front porch here or going out to lunch with them. I had the week before last, I had another student of mine. He lives up in Providence now. But he came to see me and he bought me lunch. And I said, wow, I'm always the guy who buys, so I really appreciate that. It was just great. Really happy. He's doing some really fun stuff. He's an engineer too, but he took my classes. And
Nice. He's a smart guy.
he's a smart guy. I just enjoy that. That's probably the best thing that I do is just working with these students. It's so rewarding. And three of my students from last year are working at Zweig Group right now. And
Really cool.
that's so cool too, because it's like you want to see how a real business is supposed to operate. Okay, well, get some a taste of this.
So you're shaping young minds over the next 5 years. That's your passion. We're gonna tune up some motorcycles, some VW bugs along the way, but that's your passion.
That's it.
And thankfully, building relationships with people like me and helping a fellow entrepreneur.
Well, that's the fun part. I mean, you guys keep me thinking and keep me encouraged that we're not just entirely going to shit in this culture. I mean,
so my two closing questions. One's the top book you've read in 2022. I almost want to just use Confessions of an Entrepreneur as the plug.
Well,
that's your book.
That
where can people get that?
That is available from the UA Press. If you just Google Confessions of an Entrepreneur, it will be sold at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. It's on their site, but it says it's not available until they have the inventory in their hands. But no, my favorite book of 2022 is actually a fiction. It's a novel called This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub. I heard her interviewed on NPR, and I said, man, that sounds like a cool book. It's about time travel. This 40-year-old woman goes back to when she's like 15 years old. And I've always been fascinated by that. I like fiction. I like history. Most business books are boring. That's sort of how I feel about it. I can't stand the cliche-ridden, I had somebody telling me they were leaning into something about 20 times the other day, and it made me want to strangle them.
They were leaning in.
Yeah.
I got to watch myself around you. Who knows what kind of phrases I'm throwing out.
You haven't thrown out any that I noticed today, but anyway. Yeah, the only thing We'll
lean into the last question. Any lasting advice you have for emerging leaders in the development or design community?
Yeah, I think get up early. Get up early and write down your thinking. It'll help you organize your mind. It's just those things are so important. If you're constantly writing, and if you get up early, you have at least some time during the day when you're not just constantly pelted by one interruption after another. And that's really the hard thing about the culture we live in today. I think nobody has any time to focus on anything.
Yeah, it is hard. I know I should do more deep work and like unrestricted, or where I have no access to like social media to just get my deep work done a couple hours a day. I got to be more diligent about it.
I wish I did more of it. I do get up early though. Like I was up today at probably 4:30.
I'm an early guy. Awesome. Well, Mark, I can't thank you enough for today. I really enjoyed the conversation. I enjoy our relationship. Rooting for you in all things that you do, and cherish your opinion, your stories, and your wisdom. For those that like to learn more about you, follow you, where are the best channels for them to get to you?
Well, you can email me or you can call me. My phone number is 479-387-7811, and my email is mzweig@zweiggroup.com. I'm on LinkedIn. That's awesome. I'm on Twitter. I got a ton of stuff you can read that I've written. Get the Zweig letter. It's free. Comes out every week. Buy my book. If you want to read something that's not too long and hopefully not too boring.
I'm sure it's packed with valuable takeaways. I look forward to reading it. So Thanks again to you, Mark, and thanks for everyone to listening to this episode of the Design Development Podcast. I'm Renz Hayes, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, Renz. Take care.
Hey, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Thank you so much for listening. If you found any value in this conversation, please like, share, and comment so we can get the word out to more people. It's the only way these communities grow. We're going to really change the industry. We're a growing community. Would love you to be a part of it. Please connect with us. We're going to be on all major social platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram. So all those links will be in the show notes. Enjoy the day.